I think teaching decided me. I think in some ways I've always enjoyed teaching other people how to do things. You know, when I was a kid, I loved teaching other kids how to make mud pies. And so I love to cook now, and so I like teaching people how to cook. But I guess when I think about teaching in the academic sense, when I was a MA student, I became a TA when I was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And TAs there meant you got to teach your own section. You weren't assisting, really, you were teaching your own section, and that's a real challenge if you've never taught before. But the first class that I taught was oral interpretation of literature, and I loved it. I loved watching students who were a little timid about performing or being in front of people move from being shy to sort of blossoming into these great performers. And one of the things that I really enjoyed was helping them have the courage just to be in front of people. And I did that by, you know, saying, it's okay, just breathe. We're all with you, you know. And so from there, I knew that I really wanted to pursue a career in the academy, both to be a scholar and a teacher. Yeah, I think one of the things that, especially with my grandmother, she had no patience for I don't know how or I don't want to.
Not acceptable.
Those things were unacceptable. But it wasn't sort of in a punitive way. What I learned later is that she was encouraging me to be independent and not to give up just because I might have failed at it, you know, starting out. But you know, when you're hearing that as a kid, you're not thinking about that. And so, with my own students, you know, I'll give you another example. When I was teaching a performance class, Performance of African American Literature at Amherst College, I had a student who just had a total meltdown while she was performing Zora Neale Hurston's Her Eyes Are Watching God. So she began to cry because she couldn't remember the words. And rather than letting her off the hook, I got on stage with her and I held her hand as we walked around the stage, and she just said the lines. And that's something that my grandmother would have done, that my mother would have done. Rather than just coddling her and saying, okay, you can sit down, it was like making her fight through the embarrassment, the pain. And, you know, she thanked me later for that. She wasn't happy with me at the time. But I sort of came to that understanding in that moment, because that's, again, something that my mother used to do to me. Because believe it or not, I had stage fright, severe stage fright when I was a kid. I was, you know, really talented as a singer and a little, you know, kid performer, but I didn't want to do it in front of other people. And my mother would enter me in these contests, and when it came time for me to go on stage, I didn't want to go. And she would make me go on stage. And so, you know, those are the kinds of things that I find that I draw upon when I'm teaching my own classes, or when I'm helping a student with a writing block when they're writing their dissertation. They want to just give up. I'm like, no, just send me a sentence. If you can't send to, you know, 10 pages, just send me a sentence. So those are the kinds of things that I've learned from, you know, these very powerful women in my life. I've learned humility from my students. You know, I know it's kind of cliche for people to say that they learn from their students, but I really do. But I think the way I learn from my students is the surprising things that they say and do. But I also like being taught by my students. And when I say being taught by my students, things that they come up with, the ideas that they come up with their dissertation projects, but also the kind of performances that they create on stage, things that I'm like, wow, I never would have thought about putting X and Y together to come up with Z. So I really like learning from my students. I like hanging out with my students. I feel that in social settings, outside the classroom, we both can let our hair down, and that position of power is always there. But outside the classroom, it becomes relaxed a little. And I sometimes feel that I get a truer sense of who that student is as a person in those contexts, whether it's, inviting students over to my house for dinner, going to a movie together, those kinds of things. I really enjoy that. And those are occasions for me to learn from my students as well about their background, for instance, their real beliefs about things, not just what they think the correct answer is in the classroom setting. So I really enjoy hanging out with students as well. And then the other thing that I often do in that regard is I perform for my students, so that I'm not just asking them to put their bodies on the line. I will get up and do the same thing, and that's in undergraduate courses and graduate courses as well. Sometimes I'll do the same assignment I've given to them.